Hey, we're going to do a My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy themed Ask Me Anything in honor of the 8-year anniversary of the album having just been yesterday. I wanted to apologize real fast too about the gap in videos from the last one to this one. I got very sick and I was just coughing and sniffling and coughing more, and my throat was sore and it wasn't pretty, and I just didn't have the ability to really talk for a video. So that took a little while to calm down, but now that that's done and Thanksgiving's passed, back to making videos on all things Kanye West. So I had asked on Twitter for the topics that I was going to cover in this video, but I wanted to extend that all to you as well here in the YouTube community. Whatever questions you want me to address in a separate video that I'll make tomorrow, go ahead and leave those down below. I'm also going to be making an 808s themed video for the 10-year celebration. So if you have any 808s questions that you want me to answer or topics you want me to discuss, leave those in the comments as well, and I will get to those in the video that I make sometime in the next couple days. But let's get into these. Casper said, hey, in the last episode, you were in on Socrates and Aristotle. Yeah. Do you in general agree to see the development narrative on the albums from My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Yay, Kids See Ghost, in a context of Kierkegaard and his theory on being a human and becoming a whole person? Thanks for the podcast. You're welcome. So this is in relation to the episode we just did on Pinocchio's story, and the fact that we got into talking about ancient Greek philosophy and the idea of, I'm going to butcher saying it, eudaimonia? Happiness. It was essentially Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates all trying to come up with what leads to happiness, with Plato and Aristotle looking at it much more as virtue. If you have virtue in your life and virtue alone, good things will happen. You'll be happy. It doesn't matter what else you have or don't have, riches or poverty, happy significant other or complete isolation. As long as you're virtuous and living that virtuous life, you're happy. Where Socrates was then like, don't think so. I'm gonna go with the fact that you need to have something that you're pursuing and great at, and when you have that, makes you happy. But you also need, family, friends, material items, and wealth that makes you happy. Like, all these things are part of happiness. And then, who's the dude? One guy comes in after that. It starts with an E, but he talks about hedonism. And he's just like, it's either all like whatever makes you feel good or doesn't make you feel good. But he looks into that as not just short term, like I'm going to eat all these Doritos because Doritos are delicious. But the long term, I feel good because I feel healthy and happy, and I'm happy with my body. That's better than the instant gratification of the Doritos. So a lot of people look at hedonism as just pure indulgence, which it's often associated with just carnal acts and more of that hedonistic hippie lifestyle. But really, as he put forth, it was that we get the most value out of our long-term happiness and benefit and enjoyment, and setting up things that give us stability over time is actually what gets you true joy. And that can be encompassing of what Socrates said, with having a skill that you're the best at and improving upon, and all the other things that come with being happy, family, friends, etc. So Casper's asking about Kierkegaard. I'm not saying that right either. Kierkegaard? But Kierkegaard's true individuality is called selfhood, and becoming aware of our true self is our true task and endeavor in life. It is an ethical imperative as well as a preparatory to a true religious understanding. I think the short answer to all of this is that philosophers were getting at very basic parts of humanity. What does it mean to be happy? How does that happiness manifest? They weren't necessarily the first to examine these topics. They certainly weren't the last to examine these topics. It's just they examined them in ways that really resonated, especially given their popularity and, I guess, network at the time. So I would say I don't know if Kanye is actively channeling ancient Greek philosophy or German, Kierkegaard's German philosophy. But I do think that in Kanye examining his own happiness and own development of self over time, that you see him lighting upon the same basic tenets that make up the other philosophical ideologies of these famous thinkers. One of the ones here, though, that makes it seem maybe that Kanye is maybe more in touch with philosophy than you'd expect is K Money here saying his critique of the modern age, therefore, is about the loss of what it means to be an individual. Wait, is that where I want to talk about? Modern society contributes to the dissolution of what it means to be an individual. Yeah, this is it. Through its production of the false idol of the public. It diverts attention away from individuals to a mass public that loses itself in abstractions, communal dreams, and fantasies. It is helped in this task by the media and the mass production of products to keep it distracted. Even the fight for temporal equality is a distraction. That seems very in line with a lot of what Kanye talks about with the simulation and breaking out of the simulation, and what his whole discography has been examining, which is his rise into celebrity and fame, and then how celebrity and fame pulls him apart, undermines him, twists him, corrupts him, leaves him wishing for an escape or some sort of normalcy. And that struggle then to become himself again, because he's been put into this system that made him something that wasn't Kanye West. So I don't know, but there is a lot of overlap that's very interesting, which it might just be that Kanye is the best modern philosopher of our times. I'm only partially kidding when I say that. Partially kidding. Carla was actually the one that made us aware of the philosophical relationship of ancient Greek philosophy and Kanye, so shout out to Carla, specifically Camus' Myth of Sisyphus. Kanye 101 said, how did Kanye get Jesus himself to come record on the album for the outro of Runaway? Well, as we found out in I Am a God, Kanye just sometimes talks to Jesus. They have a pretty good relationship. Nickname basis. You know, saying, what up, Yeezus? Kobe said, how much, if at all, does the Runaway film add or contribute to your view of the narrative of the album as a whole? Iffy. I think that you can always use outside materials to point to that something was on the artist's mind. But each medium in and of itself is so unique in and of itself that it's hard to say that there's a one-for-one overlap. The same way with language translation, right? You can't necessarily get a perfect translation of any work. Like, I have 2666, a book by Roberto Bolaño, and that thing could be translated by the best translator in the world and still miss out on some of the subtleties and context of the original Spanish. So I think the same thing kind of happens with the album and the short film. There's things that the film itself dictates and can do that the album can't do. And same thing with the album, there are things that the album dictates that the film can't do. But I think one of the key components to it that kind of overlaps is that we see the album focus a lot on relationships. From Devil in a New Dress on through Lost in the World, which is what? How many songs are we talking there? 1, 2, 3, 4. The last 5 songs of the album all deal with a relationship. And this relationship that starts and has some beauty to it on Devil in a New Dress, but eventually falls apart and leaves Kanye just lost in the world. And I think on Runaway, you see something similar. There's this relationship that starts, there's connection, there's some beauty, but the relationship eventually falls apart due to the pressures of society. And that this relationship, because of who this woman is and who Kanye is and the life that he lives, she doesn't fit into it. and she runs off and he chases after her, but it's just not meant to be. So I think you see similarities in some of the themes and some of the narrative tensions, specifically coming from society and how it compromises this relationship and fame. So I think you can see that those things work hand in hand, or at least echo each other enough to where you can say that those are major themes of the album and feel pretty confident in it if there wasn't, like, if there's not, or as if there wasn't enough evidence in the album already, right? But I think the film just adds to that. It's not like Kanye's making an ode to like World War II veterans in the Runaway video, and you're like, oh, does that mean that the album is somehow an ode to World War II veterans? Because that would be what? So the fact that we see two things very similar to one another, I think supports the idea that this is the major examination of the album. Topics: the studio sessions, the suits, collabs we didn't hear, overlaps with Watch the Throne. Yeah, one of the cool things about Watch the Throne is that it was actually announced before My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy came out. I think it was like August of 2010, and then we got the album the next June or July. And it was initially only supposed to be 5 tracks. So it seemed like something that Kanye and Jay-Z were working on in the lead up to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And that then they went all in on after the album was finished, and they just had this energy and were going. So I think it's kind of cool that those albums are more historically tied together than what we may remember sometimes. Collabs we didn't hear. I don't know much about that aside from all of the collabs on Good Fridays and just all of those potential tracks that could have been on the album. Especially Don't Look Down, by the way, that had Mos Def and I think Big Sean, and mentioned a phoenix specifically, which ties back to the Runaway film. The studio sessions, there's so many great stories that come out of that. I think the best source for that has to be the Complex article that was written, that you can easily find by Googling Complex and My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. That article is just insane when you sit down and read it. All the details that emerge, the policies that Kanye had. He had a bunch of signs written on the wall for the rules to be in the studio, like having to wear suits or you were kicked out of the studio. I guess they had The Holy Mountain, which is a really insane Alejandro Jodorowsky movie. The imagery is crazy. And the story itself is about multiple Jesuses in multiple dimensions, or just multiple people in multiple dimensions that seem like they might be powerful figures, but are actually like not so powerful people. And they're trying to find immortality. And then the movie actually breaks the fourth wall and starts talking to you and is like, hey, this is a movie. Like, we're not going to find immortality. We're actually trying to find reality. Like, reality is what we need. And that's one of Kanye's favorite movies. He loves Jodorowsky to the point where he actually went to go meet him. And you can see Jodorowsky talk about this and be like, I kind of knew who he was. He was really excited and nice, but I had no idea what was going on. So if you ever want to get a little bit closer to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Kanye, watch that movie. Sci-Hi has the best guest verse on the album, right? That's a good question. So let's go to So Appalled. Sci-Hi's verse is the one that, if I'm remembering correctly, wasn't supposed to be on the album. And he actually went in to the studio and put it in to the song. And Kanye didn't realize it until later when he was listening to it. And it was just like, oh shit. Okay, respect. Like, you're on. I'm so outrageous. I wear my pride on my sleeve like a bracelet. If God had an iPod, I'd be on his playlist. My phrases, amazes, the faces and places, the favorite. My cup overrunneth with hundreds. Dummy damn, it's hard not for me to waste it. The new commandment, thou shalt not hate, kid. My movement is like the civil rights. I'm Ralph David Abernathy, so call my lady Rosa Parks. I'm nothing like them. Baby, those are marks. I met this girl on Valentine's Day. Fucked her in May. She found out about April, so she chose to march. Damn, another broken heart. I keep bitches by the twos. Noah's Ark. I got a 7 on me. I can do. I call my Dro Lamar plus a Trojan in my pocket. Matt Liner. Yo, it's very fucking quotable. So many of these lines are just like him, I feel like, throwing out the best kind of couplets he can think of that are just like, oh shit, like I'd be on his playlist, like Valentine's Day, May, April, March, a Trojan in my pocket, Matt Leinart. I love the random Matt Leinart shout out. No, I'm thinking of Matt Barkley, but Matt Leinart, you know, we all thought he was going to do great things. GAT in the Pathfinder, because you haters got PhDs, you all some major haters and some math minors. Tiger, yeah, it's infinitely quotable. I don't know if it's just, yeah, it fits really well. It's like one of the most superficial raps I've seen, but on a song like So Appalled, that's just supposed to be the height of superficiality. That's very fitting to the theme of everything. So, has the best guest verse on the album. I'll say for just like bars that make you go, oh shit, yes, best guest verse. But Rick Ross has to have the best guest verse, right? Just because the heights of Ross's bars on that are like, fuck. And people point to that still as like, yo, what's the best Rick Ross verse? Devil in a New Dress. So, yeah. Yeah, overall, Rick Ross, if you just want some, like, lines that pop, I'm blanking on the word that I want to use, but just, like, punchline bars, I guess. Say hi. What else do we got going on here? Oh, no, I lost it. There we go. Would you guys consider My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy to be the single greatest album of all time or just of this century? I think you can make an argument for both, especially the fact that the sound of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is so dynamic and amazing and beat the shit out of anything else in the genre, much like, and then beyond. Like, it beat the shit out of every other album that I can think of the last century in terms of just soundscape, how dynamic that soundscape is, every song, and to have that range from something like Power to something like Lost in the World to Runaway. Like, every album wishes it had a Runaway, and this album has Runaway, Power, Devil in a New Dress, All of the Lights. Fucking hell. So there are a lot of amazing, great albums, but I don't know if any are as sonically diverse or lush as My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. I'm sure that you can make cases for some, and please, by all means, send me those because I want to listen to them. But at the same time, like, I look at what the Beatles were doing with a lot of their, like, best experimental albums, and I don't think they're as quality, pop-wise, beginning to end the way that Kanye's album is. Like, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy has artistic depth with pop soundscape and merges those things in a way that's just beautiful. And I know people pointed to Pimp a Butterfly as one of the best albums of the century or better than My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. I just disagree. To me, To Pimp a Butterfly is like Schindler's List or Saving Private Ryan or another really great Spielberg movie that mixes like that blockbustery element with emotion and depth, but it lacks, I don't know, to me, a lot of the artistic nuance of something that Kanye's doing. We always compare what Kanye's doing to Kubrick, right? So you can look at a Spielberg movie like Saving Private Ryan and get this very impressive and dramatic war movie that hits on all these buttons, especially like the opening beach scene of them landing at Normandy is one of the craziest movie sequences I've ever seen. And the rest of the movie's amazing as well, but I think about that compared to Full Metal Jacket and Kubrick's take on war. And to me, Full Metal Jacket is just far, far more interesting and nuanced and dynamic, but it's not as popular because it's weirder. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, I think because of how it's showing so much rather than straight up telling the way Kendrick is, it often goes under the radar in how much depth it has and how much it's a critique of modern American culture. And I just think the soundscape on To Pimp a Butterfly isn't nearly as fascinating or interesting as My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Like, Wilson's Theory and This Dick Ain't Free, whatever that song is, and King Kuta, to me, are like the sonic highlights, maybe These Walls as well, of To Pimp a Butterfly, but Blacker the Berry. But there's a whole middle section that just bores me. Or like Kanye's Soundscape, nah. So, yeah, I'm going to say yes. I don't know. It's not my favorite Kanye album still, as much as I love it. I think Yeezus and The Life of Pablo are doing even more interesting things than My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, but they tip so much more into the artistic rather than balancing that I would say My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy kind of takes the overall prize just for how well it does everything. Caleb said, maybe compare the Wizard of Oz theme you talk about in your podcast with Ye's current media relations. Has he learned how to live in Oz, or is he back in Kansas? Excuse me. Sorry. So one of the things that we talk about is that My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy uses a Wizard of Oz structure. Kanye, prior to releasing this album in 2010, had tweeted out that he had seen Wicked 4 times and loved it, that it was his story. Wicked, as some of you may know, is the hit Broadway play or musical that's based on the Wicked Witch of the West's life and served as a prequel to the Wizard of Oz. Wizard of Oz is the story of Dorothy, who starts off in Kansas and gets upset with her family, and she's kind of angry and goes to nap, and a tornado comes through, and she's swept off into this magical, different place that's full of interesting characters, like a cowardly lion and a scarecrow without a brain and a tin man that needs something else. There's witches, there's wizards, there's good witches, there's little people, flying monkeys. Also, it's a crazy place. And the whole point is that Dorothy's trying to get home again. And when she finally does arrive home, having made friends and learned and grown, she gets home and she's just like, there's no place like home. We see a similar arc happening on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. We start off in the real world with dark fantasy, gorgeous, and power, which is Kanye more reflecting on the state of things until at the end of Power, he says he's jumping out the window. And Power gets more and more manic as it goes on. Until you're at the end, jumping out the window, and you get the interlude, which serves as the tornado. And you arrive in Kanye's Oz, the Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which is why we get all of the lights, which is this bizarro life that Kanye has never lived, but because it's part of the fantasy and this kind of strange new reality and world that he's in, we get this life where he has none of the fame, none of the power, and just sees himself as this guy that like hits his wife, goes to jail, ruins his daughter, and lives this terrible kind of existence where he's powerless and can't do anything. And then we move from that into the idea of being a monster, and then into trying to find love and romance before ultimately being lost. And it seems that Kanye never really comes home. Where Dorothy gets that closure and gets that catharsis, Kanye does it. He ends up lost in the world. You could maybe make the argument that America, him coming back to America at the end and Who Will Survive in America, is kind of like him coming home and being like, shit's bad, shit's ugly. But there's still something fantastic about how that album ends. And it's weird that the next album is Yeezus, Kanye as this character, Yeezus. And then the next album's Pablo, Kanye a character again. And then the next album's Ye, him coming back to himself and almost waking up from the fantasy. Ye as an album ends with Nicki Minaj doing the voicemail. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy opens with Nicki Minaj introducing the album. So you kind of have these bookends of that journey where she, in the very stylized way, opens My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, but then in this way that's much less stylized, just her leaving a voicemail, she kind of concludes it. So, the Wizard of Oz theme, that's that. Ye's current media relations. Has he learned how to live in Oz, or is he back in Kansas? I think he's been trying to return to Kansas, and in doing so, trying to find power and stability in that based on what he's learned having been in the simulation. I don't know if it necessarily worked, if it just reinforced what he had already known, that the media kind of sucks, but we got I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that, but I think he's learning and growing, and at least at this point seems more back in Kansas than as lost as he had been. Even though I think some would argue that he's more lost than ever before, I really don't think so. I think him speaking up came from a place of having that confidence to try to speak up and affect change. So fucking basic, and you've already answered it. Lori Wood is all right. But favorite song on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, I think at this point is Blame Game. I'm a sucker for really dynamic songs that have various bits and pieces that move from this to this that are just unexpected in where they go. And I like a lot of postmodern techniques and elements. So as much as I love and adore Runaway, and that soundscape blows me away and gives me a feeling every time I hear it that no other song does, Blame Game also gives me a feeling no other song does. And I still remember being blown away the first time I listened to this album and heard Runaway, being like, will there ever be another song that's that just fascinating? And then I got to Blame Game and I was like, holy fuck, what is this? Like it just moves in such weird directions. The soundscape is so bizarre. The Chris Rock outro, I love that shit so much. So Blame Game is definitely my favorite. Followed closely by Lost in the World, Runaway, and then everything else on the album. Power I love. Harvey said, what do you think the overarching narrative of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is, and how does the album approach it? I think I kind of answered that a bit with the Wizard of Oz explanation, but really it's Kanye exploring fame and the cost of fame and the price of fame, and it's something that he had been building up to since Late Registration, where he first started looking at the consequences and dangers of fame. Graduation, we start to see how fame affects him and causes him to start to build this ego that compromises relationships. And then 808s and Heartbreak, that's fully explored, where fame has left him wishing that he could be a real person again. And then My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is just him having to, almost in that hedonistic way, in the bad hedonism way, where you're just like, if this gives me pleasure, fuck it, I'm gonna do it. We see him fall into the fantasy of celebrity and how fucking crazy it is, but also how destructive it can be, and where it leaves you at the end of it is just feeling lost, and like you're unable to have relationships, you're unable to have this satisfying existence, and you're left looking at America and American culture being like, the fuck is this? I was promised freedom, I was promised liberty, I was promised all of this, and instead here I am being dicked around by everything. Like, I end up, I don't know, swallowed and spit out and chewed up by this system that doesn't actually care about me. Who can survive in this? Which seems to be one of Kanye's major critiques throughout his entire discography, is about how American culture, specifically in consumerism, and this search or this hunt for like more to have, and celebrity is actually this lie. It's not fulfilling at all. We got that as early as All Falls Down. He explores it more in 808s and Heartbreak, explores it more in like artistic, philosophical ways here, and then continues on Yeezus with New Slaves into the life of Pablo, where he has to choose the big booty model and all the things that are so nice versus a real romantic relationship and a family and all the benefits of that. Yeah, so the album approaches it by setting up fantasy, or setting up celebrity as this bizarre fantasy that has these highs and these lows, but ultimately leaves you unsatisfied. Oh, and most of the times that Kanye's talking about his relationship with a woman on the album, that's his relationship with fame, celebrity, the music industry, all of that. So that's why this album was also him post the Taylor Swift incident and his career nearly being over because so many people were so upset with him outside of the industry and the general public, but also in the industry. That's what I've been dealing with. Purely sonically, this has to be his best album, right? Yeah. For me, while My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, that was Noah Thomas, represents a pinnacle of Kanye's ability to form a satisfying pop album release, the album is less experimental and boundary-pushing than his other post-graduation work. How do you feel about this album as a safer apology album, as Kanye has called it? Some people might think that that's kind of crazy. I think at the time, this was insanely experimental and boundary-pushing, but that Kanye has built on this. So in hindsight, this almost feels safer in ways than what he would do on future albums. Like, you compare Runaway and Blame Game to Blood on the Leaves. Like, Blame Game, as emotional as it is really bizarre in a lot of ways as well. And Runaway, for as emotional as it is kind of one-dimensional at times too. So you have the dimensionality of Blame Game, but maybe too much going on. And you have Runaway, which is so beautiful and emotional, but maybe a little safe in ways, despite the outro being insane and despite it being like this 9-minute song. I feel like Blood on the Leaves takes both concepts and puts them together in a way that is also really thrilling and challenging and dynamic, and that if you compare Blood on the Leaves to Runaway, I think subjective appreciation aside, if you're looking at objective complexity, something like Blood on the Leaves comes out on top. And then you compare that to what he does on, say, Ye with Ghost Town. And I think he just builds on what he did on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy in ways that makes My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy less interesting in hindsight, which happens a lot. We see that with music. You look at Elvis, and that Elvis was this insane person that was shaking his hips, and his music was blasphemous. How dare he talk about those things? And now those things are all really fucking tame. So I wouldn't say that My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is like Elvis, but just that similar dynamic going on. We see it in sports too. You look at what Drew Brees and Tom Brady do at the quarterback position these days and compare it to even the numbers of John Elway or Terry Bradshaw. And Terry Bradshaw, who is this amazing quarterback, looks really pedestrian. Like, the average backup quarterback could put up numbers like Terry Bradshaw, but it's just how the game has developed and changed over time. So, yeah, I tend to agree with that notion. And then you can't see this last one. Nope. I'm just going to read it. This is by Resneps. How do the features relate to the narrative of the album? It's so jam-packed, yet we often describe it as Kanye exploring his own fame. Maybe a stupid question, but I just want that YouTube clout and the seemingly random but good features have always lessened my enjoyment of the album. Dying. So Kanye on College Dropout had no clout at the time. And a lot of the features that come in are just standard features that don't necessarily relate to the themes of what the songs are about. Like you look at Spaceship and GLC and the other guy, So Sorry, don't necessarily stay on topic. And they may have this idea of getting out. I think GLC maybe brings it back to the topic at times, but it's much more just braggadocio, standard rap shit. You look at Two Words, and there's not really a major theme that's running throughout. It's just kind of two great verses. Get 'em high. It's just kind of good fun, but it's not Kanye having a specific theme that the guest verse plays into, which is what we see him doing from really more and more on the albums. Starting to not have much time left. So by the time we get to Late Registration, the next album, Late Registration, we start to see the guest verses being in line with the theme a little bit more. And then with Graduation, very much the guest verses are part of the thematic development going on. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, very much the same way, where everybody's kind of on topic. Jay-Z maybe a little too much when it comes to describing being a monster, but a lot of the time that Kanye's using a guest feature, it's serving to illustrate some aspect of his psyche. Whether that's Kid Cudi and Raekwon on Gorgeous, or how he's using the guest features on So Appalled, where So Appalled is supposed to show this decadence, 30 white bitches, different exotic fishes. It makes sense that he has Sci-Hi, Jay-Z, Pusha, RZA, and Swizz, because it's supposed to be this decadent, extravagant thing. Pusha on Runaway gets at that just asshole mentality so well. So if there's a guest feature, not gonna last longer. If there's a guest feature, it's serving some purpose on the album. So I think the use of them is good and enjoyable and adds to the context. It's just having to actively figure out what that context is, which is something that we do on our episodes. So listen to our podcast. And I'm going to get to part 2 tomorrow, as I'm currently dying. But the best Kanye West song tournament, or the best Kanye West song tournament Deathmatch Extreme 3000, is going to be happening starting December 1st. You can go to challenge.com/2018 deathmatch and fill out a bracket. And there's 146 songs that we're going to be going through from December 1st through December 25th on Twitter. So you can vote every single day, midnight Eastern time, all throughout the day. And the winners we're going to have some prizes, whether it's a Yeezus book or some of our shirts or vinyl of Kanye's albums. So you'll definitely want to fill out some brackets and get that going. You have until December 1st for that to happen. And then I'll be back tomorrow as whatever My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy questions you want, and 808's questions. I appreciate the patience in the absence that I've had, and looking forward to never coughing again in my entire fucking life. Happy 8-year anniversary to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and keep it wavy.